is a D6 generation pip. One of those dots on the side of a six-sided die. Yeah, a pip. A short pip. Little something. About anything gaming related. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ. We'll see what's coming up today.
Welcome back. We're in a whole new pip. Do we even know what number pip this is, Russ?
It is pip number January 2020.
There we go.
It is the first pip of 2020.
First pip of the new year it is.
I feel like I can see exceptionally in 2020. Like I have really good vision.
Kept that one in your pocket, didn't you?
I've been saving that all month, Craig.
Well, that's impressive.
How are your holidays?
My holidays were good. How were your holidays?
Excellent. I hope all of our listeners had a wonderful holiday season.
Absolutely.
And are just raring to go in a brand new year.
In a whole new year of goodness.
And a whole new decade.
It's a decade as well.
Right? I heard a story. This has nothing to do with gaming.
Okay.
I'm just going to throw this out there.
Yeah, go ahead.
I heard a story that people are excited that we're finally in the 20s.
Yeah.
Because now it's a decade people can reference. Like, no one likes calling it the teens.
That's true.
And no one liked the aughts. And so there's a theory that everybody talked about generations instead of decades because we had no better frame of reference. So we're all picking on each other's generations. But now we can go back to decades and be
good.
like,
Thank God.
the teens suck, but now we're in the 20s.
That's good.
Or whatever. Whatever your
and you know what?
are.
I bet it's going to even be less anxiety overall.
Right. But it's time for the roaring 20s, Craig. And you know what? There's nothing better to do when the times are roaring than play games.
That's right. Well,
everybody knows that.
That's good when the times are not roaring, too.
Yes.
But it's especially good when the times are roaring.
But, really, gaming is firing on all cylinders. And
it really is.
Great example.
Again, a golden age.
It is a golden age, and there's so many great miniature games. And one of the games we've been playing a lot of is Star Wars Legion.
Yep. You know what I love, Russ, is when there's a game in our stable that comes up over and over again.
Yeah.
I love a game that can survive. We stop playing it for a while and we go back to it.
Exactly.
I really appreciate those because there aren't that many. There's most of these games are flash in the pan.
And the magic is the companies have to continue to support them.
They have to.
So way back in 2018, back in those teens. Back in that other whole decade.
That decade.
You remember that Star Wars Legion came out. Craig and I were at Adepticon.
We were like,
first
no.
Launched. We were negative on it. We were like, not negative. It was just like, it's just another miniature game, whatever. But then, if you remember, if you want to go back and listen, we did a full review back in July of 2018. I think it was episode 241.
241 sounds familiar.
And we did a deep dive, and Craig bought in. I managed to resist.
Yes, you did.
But Craig bought in.
Why did you resist? Because it didn't pass the Wakeland test.
It didn't pass my test of more than two factions. And I think I said at the time, love the mechanics, love the rules, love the idea of it. The models are great. Had a great time playing with you, but you owned everything pretty much. And so I'll just show up and play with you.
Right, yeah.
But it's only two factions. Right. But then what happened this year, Craig?
Well, this year.
Or actually 2019, technically.
Fantasy Flight. Hope to God they stick with it. God knows what's going on over there at Fantasy Flight right now.
We're hearing some rumors, and hopefully they're not,
Yeah, hopefully they stick with Star Wars Legion.
Yeah.
A new starter set comes out, which is
a whole new time period.
Clone Wars.
Speaking of time, see what time is all together?
It all
time
look at that. Russ,
so
you're even deeper.
A whole generation before.
Yeah.
Again,
Look at that.
Now the new starter set has, of course, Clone Wars stuff in it.
Yep.
So now you've got the Separatists, the droids, Roger.
Yep.
And you also have the Clone Warriors.
Yep.
Which is fantastic for a bunch of reasons. One, from my point of view, it ups the ante to 4 factions.
Yes.
Also, I've been unabashedly a fan of the prequels since day one.
You have always been a champion.
I love the droid. I think the droid army. I'd love to see a Gungan army, quite frankly. Send hate mail to Craig.
Because I'll forward it.
Yeah, but what I think also smart about this is I'm seeing a lot of folks who, younger gamers who are young adults now, but grew up on the Clone Wars. Yeah. The cartoon, which is fantastic.
Yep.
Just great storytelling and fantastic characters.
Right. And interestingly enough, clones versus droids.
Right. So it's just appealing to a whole new group, but I liked it a lot. What was also interesting about this was all the other Star Wars Legion model kits are very much like unipose, simple to assemble,
plastic,
easy to get together.
bendy.
The droid forces are kind of retro, on sprues, got to clip them out.
Hard plastic.
One droid is 7 parts, each leg, each arm, torso plus head plus a gun, right? So a lot of lot more fiddly to put together, but as an old school gamer, I'm like, bring it.
Yeah.
The droidecas, the ones that roll around with their little force shields, they're a lot of bits too. But it was just fun to bring them together. I was super excited. I picked up the starter set. Yeah. I knew Craig already had plenty of dudes from the Rebels and the Imperials, and it's all interchangeable. So even though, if you're really hung up on anachronisms in the Star Wars universe, this might be a problem. Right. But from a game mechanic point of view, and in my world, I'm used to War Machine now, where I can play young striker versus old striker versus medium age Vlad. So I've already gotten over that part. And 40K players have similar sort of abilities if you want to play Horus Heresy against non-Horus Heresy or whatever. So. So I painted up the droids. Craig broke out some of his rebellion guys. We gave it a couple tries. And we've posted a VREP that'll be up about the time this comes out.
Right. And another cool thing is at about the same time or a little bit after, more recently, they came up with the whole concept of the skirmish rules.
Yes.
So to play skirmish, instead of 800 points, which is more than twice what you would get in a
starter box.
Unless you're fielding some really powerful characters. It's 500 points. Yep. So it's a starter box and an extra unit or two.
Yep.
And it's also played on a smaller table, which coincidentally meant that I could use a lot of my city terrain stuff that I put together for Marvel with my Star Wars terrain. So now it kind of looks like a cool Star Wars city. And it uses new deployment and condition and mission cards.
Yep.
So to match the 3x3 table instead of the 3x6. And so we were able to do that. So that was our first game, really.
Yeah, it was.
Was a skirmish
with the new stuff.
So Russ is fielding the new droids with freaking General Grievous.
Oh yes.
Yeah, he's brute. He's
awesome.
Brute.
What a great model.
And it's an awesome model.
With all
They're
kinds
all awesome models.
And what's also cool about this though is like they went crazy with Grievous, and I don't know how many other models are like this, but he comes with multiple poses out of the box.
That's a new thing.
Which is very GW retro, right?
Yeah.
So I can model Grievous either with all 4 lightsabers out and no cloak, or he's got his cloak on and his arms are all together and he's only got 2 arms with maybe 2 lightsabers, or I can give him 1 lightsaber and a blaster, and it's a special kind of blaster. It's got special rules. So you basically can model him how his war gear set up, which is really neat too.
Yeah. And there's I just put together, I can't remember her name, but she's from Star Wars Rebels, the cartoon. She's the Mandalorian from that. And she has the option of going with 2 pistols.
Yep.
And the option of having a helmet on or having the helmet off.
Awesome.
And then there's, again, as you said, there's a war gear upgrade for her where you can give her the dark saber.
Right.
And that you can model that on her as well. And that's where I went with, even if I can't afford the points, she's got to be wielding the dark saber.
The dark saber is a big deal right now, thanks to the Mandalorian show.
Exactly. So it's a really cool. They are coming out with these really cool options that key in with the war gear cards. So what was cool to me was that I could feel the as long as I stuck with generics, right, for my commander and stuff like that, I could feel the generic rebel army, and it could be any kind of planetary defense force or little terrorist organization, depending on your affiliation and your view of the galaxy. And everything's true from a certain point of view.
Right.
And so not only did I enjoy that, I kind of embraced this idea of dragging my rebel force backwards in time. So I went and I got the Jyn Erso from Rogue One.
Yeah.
I got on the internet, I found a 3D printer who does a Saw Gerrera from Rogue One, the terrorist rebel leader. And so I can now start fielding these rebel forces that are much earlier in the timeline and could more conceivably run into a droid army, battle droid force that might, have been laying dormant or whatever. And it really gets those creative juices flowing again, which is awesome because, to Russ's point, for a very long time now, for a couple of years or a year and a half at least, it's always been the same game, right? You've got rebels versus stormtroopers. Now, you've got a lot of troops available and a lot of commanders. And this is another cool thing about Star Wars Legion is your army changes drastically how it plays based on your commanders.
It does a lot.
And you've got 2 commander slots that you can use in the standard game. So you can have a rebel force that's that's really elite, or a rebel force that's a little more has more staying power, or there's a lot of different variations on that you can do, but ultimately it's still the rebels versus the stormtroopers. But now you add those droids in there, and it's a totally different aesthetic. They bring a totally different set of new special army-wide rules that excuse me, that play in a really cool, unique way. We don't know how the clones work yet, because Russ, instead of fielding them as an army, has been cutting their heads off and using them as
they
terrain.
make great basing
Yes,
dead
indeed,
soldiers.
yeah.
They look cool too. They have a pretty cool vehicle in there, a little skimmer. But they have a whole different aesthetic going on. There's talk. We'll see. I'm really hopeful that Fantasy Flight supports the game strongly
me too.
going forward.
I hope so.
And, there's been some changes over there, I guess, recently, and I hope everything goes well. But I'm hopeful. There's so many great ideas now coming out of The Mandalorian, the TV, the Disney Plus show. There's so many great ideas from the Clone Wars and the Rebel series that we've already seen them pull from for X-Wing.
Yeah.
So it feels like there's just the opportunities are endless. Clearly, you could have a Mandalorian faction. What's going on in the Disney Plus show. So lots of really great ideas there, and it's just so exciting. What I like about it too, like you mentioned, Craig, the changing of the leaders really does a lot to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot more going on with the droids. So right now, from a variety point of view, from the droid faction, I went with 3 units of droids, but even with the basic units, you've got a lot of choices there too in terms of, do you give them missile launchers? Do you give them like an assault weapon? It's almost very much like a 40K squad. Like you get your basic guys, you can increase their numbers from their base number to 1 extra, and then you can add another guy who's got a missile launcher, like a heavy weapon, or you can add another guy who's got like an assault, like high damage, short range weapon. Then they just come out with a unit of sort of droid specialists, basically snipers and other sort of things.
Yeah.
There's already the units of droid deckers, which I have 2 of, which I find to be great at absorbing damage, because they've added some new rules for these guys just for shields, which are great. They're not good at anti-vehicle, but they're great at anti-infantry, so they're a nice addition. But I don't want to buy too many more basic units, because I've already got 2 great leaders in Dooku and Grievous. They both play completely differently, where Dooku's very powerful, sort of Sith guy, but he also is a really good commander, whereas Grievous is just he's almost like just a bomb. You just send him in the enemy lines and just watch him cut people up with 4 lightsabers.
But how's his courage, Russ?
Grievous's interesting thing is, one of the things that's interesting about the droid faction in general is they have this problem where if you don't give them direct orders. So in Star Wars Legion, one of the nice mechanics is your leaders give you a deck of your leaders are used in conjunction with some base cards in the game to build a deck of cards that you use for orders each turn. And these cards dictate your initiative, who gets to go first, but also which of your units, if any, get special command orders. And if you don't give a unit a command order, you got to kind of bolt action style. You got to go to the bag and pull out a random unit you get to do. The problem with the battle droids is if you don't give them direct orders, their AI kicks in and they shoot first and act second. So each unit has 2 actions, but if you have to always shoot first, it really limits your tactical options. For example, you can't move to a bit better position before you shoot, or maybe run twice instead of shooting because you have a crappy shot,
or aim and shoot.
There's a lot of reasons you just want to shoot first. So you really want to be giving those command orders. What's interesting is the droids have this really cool sort of cascade rule where if you give 1 unit of droids an order and they're near another unit of droids, they also get a free order, but that means you can't spread your droids out. So the droid army is sort of that swarm faction that's not very bright.
Right.
So they're kind of neat that way. But I don't want to buy too many more of these droids because I've already got some nice leadership choices, but there's some other cool new stuff coming right around the corner. There's I think the B2 battle droids, the bigger ones. So if you remember in the movies, there's those big, tall, hulky droids that sort of always have one fist curled up and they have like wrist blasters on them. They're kind of bronze colored. Those guys are coming out very soon, supposedly February. But the other big thing coming out in February is a tank from the droids.
Tank from the Gungan
So
assault.
I feel like I'll have plenty of points once I throw in some B2s and a tank. I feel like I won't really have the points for more regular droids.
Right.
And that'll put me in a really strong spot. But it'll also be interesting to see how it goes because Craig's got some nice heavy units too, of course, from both the Imperium and the Rebels. And yet I'm sure he's bashful about fielding them because he knows I have limited access.
Well, the Rebels don't have any heavy units.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the Rebels have like
they have Snowspeeder.
But that's not heavy. That's like, true. Harsh language.
Well, don't they have that cool radial cannon thing?
Yes,
that's pretty
good
cool.
At taking out heavy
there you go.
units.
So lots of good stuff happening. And I think what's really fun is you tell me, Craig, but it feels like the play style of each faction. We haven't tried the clones yet, but the Rebels feel completely different than the Imperials.
Yeah.
The Imperials feel completely different from the droids.
Yeah.
And what I'm really curious about is how the clones versus the Imperials feel.
Right.
It was a funny story. I was watching Clone Wars, the cartoon, with my oldest daughter for the first time the other day.
Yeah.
And she's like, Dad, I'm noticing in this cartoon that the clones are the good guys, but how come they look more like the Empire than the Separatists who are the bad guys? I'm like, oh, funny story about that. And how come their ships look like giant Star Destroyers? I'm like, oh, funny. How come their logo kind of looks like, and how come the Jedi logo looks kind of like the Rebels? I'm like, well, funny story about all that. So clearly I got to go watch the prequels with her again because she's out of touch. I feel like a failed geek father.
Educated.
So I'm really curious, theoretically, I would imagine the clones would be more pointy than the Imperium, but also more accurate and skilled if they're based on the cartoon because they're pretty talented. But then in the cartoon, they started bringing out the young clones that were like more rookie and sloppy than the veteran clones. So I don't know where they're going to go with that.
No. Well, I mean, I wish somebody who had some would put them together and we could see.
That guy should get on that.
Yeah, that guy should get on that because I am very curious to see how the clones are different from the Empire.
Well, I could easily do that. Maybe you may have convinced me.
Yeah, well.
So one other thing I should mention about this is it is dirt simple. While assembling the battle droids is annoying because not annoying, but a bit of work because there's so many parts per droid. Painting them is simple with contrast paint.
That's true. Yeah.
I literally prime my battle droids with a white primer, and then hit them with I think it's the skeleton horde
skeleton
ink
horde.
or contrast paint. And it just gets right in all their lines and look exactly like the brown battle droids right out of the movie.
They do look
and it was
like
it's literally one coin of paint, and you just avoid hitting the gun, and then you hit the gun with contrast black, and you're done.
Yeah.
And so painting battle droids is super simple. The droid deck is just a little bit more work, but not much. And so I feel like the clones would be also very simple because of the contrast white.
Right.
I feel like the hardest part would be like painting their little grill and their helmet.
Yeah.
And painting their guns black. You could probably get through them, knock them out, and you'd probably want to add more detail to them if you're hardcore, but I could make them table ready in probably a half a day. And there's not many of them because they're kind of high pointy.
Right. Now, the problem is that the starter box is going to be a very small...
Yeah, I'm going to have to buy at least one more unit.
To try.
But I think they've already got a specialist unit out.
Do they?
And I think they've got something else coming out, and they've already got their extra skimmer out.
Yeah. Well, Fantasy Flight is really good at doing that sort of broad release, right?
Yeah.
So they don't have like, February is Empire month. They kind of release units at a time, one for they've been doing it for the Rebels and the Empire for a long time. So where the Rebels will get a release and the Empire will get a release, and they'll usually be sort of parallel in theme, if not power.
Right.
So for instance, the month that the Empire got the Occupier tank from Rogue One, the Rebels got the Land Speeder. Right. Which I really want one. It bothers me that it's about 1/3 the amount of plastic and about 1/3 the points, but the same dollar amount as the Occupier tank. And I don't know how I'm going to match that Luke Skywalker Land Speeder brown, because that's what all of the Land Speeders are using. All of the most fashionable land speeders
just go
are
different.
That brown.
Go yellow from Phantom Menace.
Oh God, no, no.
How about turn like the Amidala's little skimmer there with a little gun on the front?
I want it to be brown.
All right.
I want it to be that brown, but I don't know yet. I mean, I'm looking at it and I'm like, talk about something that's going to go down to harsh language. But it's like super cool. Like you could, and they're very much like, a weapon that's being used by this insurrection because it's a civilian vehicle.
You need like 5 of them.
That's clearly I need 5 of them at least.
So I one of the things that's also interesting is because you're right, they just came out. They kind of do what Privateer Press used to do, which was give everybody a little something at the same level.
Yeah.
So they came out with they're cranking out operatives now. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
So like there's rebel operatives, there's imperial operatives. There's operatives now coming out for the sedition, the separatists and the sedition.
Now, who's that going to be?
I don't know, but there's lots of choices.
That'll be interesting.
But like, what's interesting about operatives is they don't count as your leader slot.
Yeah,
I don't think, but they still can add cards to your deck.
Right. Well, that's no. There've been operatives like Chewbacca's an operative.
That's right.
Sabine Wren, that's her name, the Mandalorian from the Rebels.
Yeah,
she's an operative. Boba Fett is an operative.
Isn't there a version of Vader who's an operative now? I think they've added...
That's what's coming out is right. Luke, the Jedi Luke.
Right.
Like Return of the Jedi Luke.
Right.
And Darth Vader, those are both operatives. They're coming out as operatives. And they come with cards that take over other card slots in your command hand. And your command hand starts as everybody gets there's a pip in the corner, just to rehash this. There's a 4 that everybody has, which when you use it goes back in your hand. Every other card you use is burnt after you use it, right? So you've got 2 1s, 2 2s, and 2 3s. That's basically your initiative roll that turn is your card. And it tells you how many orders you can give out and what kind of units you can give orders to. The operative cards are also a 1, a 2, and a 3, but only 99% of the time give an order to that operative.
Right.
So that operative's not giving you any sort of command radius. It's not giving you any command and control over your force, but that's how you activate these really cool abilities. So for instance, Boba Fett is using his flamethrower and his monofilament whipcord because you use the 1 pip card. So that turn he's going to have these weapons.
So it's not on his basic tool set. And they did the similar thing with the droids, where Grievous's best powers are actually in his command card, not on his thing. Yeah. So really, it's the command card is when Grievous pops all 4 arms out. And it's a once per game. So it reminds me very much, and Craig saw this happen, it's very much like popping your feet in War Machine. Yeah. There's that moment where your operative, or if you have a leader like an attack-based leader like Grievous, who just does one thing, and what Grievous is, he gets to attack every unit within range 1. Brutal. So if you get Grievous in the right spot, you literally can really do heavy damage. I cored Craig's army with this trick. But the problem with it is, much like the operative, only Grievous gets the order. Yeah. And so you're really doing it at the expense of really good. So it's almost like your leader's, it's a really cool mechanic because it distracts your leader or distracts your command and control that turn. While this one guy's doing something cool and the rest of your army's like, boss, you got any orders for me? Right. And you just kind of do their own thing.
And for the droids, that's really brutal. A detriment.
So whereas Dooku has got more he does have a little bit of that like Grievous does, but he's also got more command and control. He does it. So he's more responsible. Yeah. So you have this reckless commander with a low leadership, Grievous, who runs as soon as things go bad, which is right out of the Clone Wars cartoon. Right. And you might have Dooku, who's super scary. He's also more points than Grievous, but he's also better at using his armies. Right. And the droids just seem to perform better under Grievous's command, which is also fluffy. So those leaders really change things.
And the interesting thing is you don't have to take those operative cards.
Right.
There's 4 generic cards that everybody starts with, a generic 1, a generic 2, and a generic 3, and then the 4. Then you have to have at least 1 commander. They're going to put in their 1, 2, and 3. And then your operative, you can choose. Do you want to keep the generic stuff, or do you want to have your special cool ability to completely core somebody's army, which of course, who wouldn't want that?
But if your operative dies early,
then that's
now that card is just very much wasted.
And it's just all it's good for is the initiative pip.
Right.
So I think if you're looking at this game, I think our enjoyment of the game and our appreciation of the game has only grown for these really innovative elements of it, like the initiative being tied to the command card, which is tied to the command and control, which is tied to now these different army rules and mechanics also, like the droids not needing, but highly benefiting even more so than others from a direct order being given to them. You also have other cool units. The last, I think it's the 1 or 2 releases ago for the Rebels and the Empire, you have this new concept of a support weapon. Right. So the support weapon takes up its own slot. It's its own unit, but if you have this this ability now, which is I think it's called relay, which actually might be what you have. When you give the trooper unit an order, they can relay an order to the support weapon that goes with them, and they have this ability to then link fire. So the support weapon can fire at the same time you activate the trooper unit, but then it gets its token flipped also. So they're both basically activating at the same time. Right. Or you can keep that activation in your pocket so that you can try to maneuver your opponent into a position where
better shot.
They're going to get a better shot. Exactly. So within the core rules, they have a lot of leeway to come up with more innovative ways to introduce things. So we're really appreciative of the stuff that's been there all along, and these really cool card mechanics and the mission.
That's what I wanted to bring up.
Stuff.
I think the missions
Really
is another thing that's extended even more. Because if you remember way back to like episode 1 of the show or 2, we talked about this idea that we wished miniature gaming companies would just create basically decks of deployment scenarios and sort of conditions on the battlefield. And many companies have now done that, and Fantasy Flight has really embraced it with this game in particular. And what's been fun to watch is, in addition to new cards coming out for these things with the different factions, they've also started to come out with different terrain pieces. So if you buy the crashed ATST, there's mission cards for that. They've got the new
the
droid
set.
escape pod. There's the objective set. And Craig has many of these cards now, and we just had a wonderful game, one of the big games we played last time, where we ended up lengthwise on the board with mines on the table and these objectives. We're trying to intercept communications, and the game really pivots around these missions and gives it more variety. So even if you only had one other opponent to play with, and even if you both had only one army each, changing leaders adds a lot of variety. But if you pick up some of these fun terrain pieces just to paint up to your collection, you've also got more missions now, more variety now, and it adds a lot more depth to the game and replayability.
And so you've got that grid, right? And the grid is your 3 deployment zones, 3 missions, and 3 conditions.
Right.
And that is directly out of the rule book from Dust Warfare.
Yes, it was. Remember
that?
Dust? Yeah.
But they just had that grid of 9, and every game you played, and you did this exactly what you're doing in Legion. You're taking turns eliminating one, so that it's going to be one of those 3 objectives. But now you've got the cards that come in the core set. Then you've got these other cards that come with these other expansion sets. So it's random. You've got a bunch of different options for those 3 each thing of that grid. And that it gives you some dynamic ownership, some dynamic control over the game as it develops pre-game, so you can set up the board to look really cool, because you have no idea where your deployment zones are going to be. You have no idea what the mission's going to be.
It also lets certain units highlight, right? So what was fun about this is, and as Craig mentioned, you're laying out these cards, 3 of each type, and then each player gets 2 votes to eliminate 2 cards, which dictates the kind of battle you're going to be fighting. In this game Craig and I were playing, I tried to push us towards the long table edge, because I had a lot of missile launchers in my army, and I wanted to try them out, and they were like range 4. I thought that was going to be good. Well, unbeknownst to me, Craig had sniper rifles in his army, which are basically infinite range.
They are not no longer. Actually.
Oh, did they big that in?
They're out to 4 now.
Okay, that's nice. But in any case, I think
they're maybe out to 5. They're one longer than the standard range.
So you had felt in the past they may not be worth their points, but in this battle they were huge.
Yeah.
Because they
one
really
team. Let's not assume make it sound like I'm spamming them. But I had one team, and they were key.
But they were
clutch in 2 different points.
2 very big points where they broke one unit. They were putting wounds on my leaders. They were very critical.
Yeah.
And it was super cool, and it didn't feel broken. It felt like, oh my God, there's a sniper team way far away, out of range of anything I have.
Right.
Now, if I had skimmers and flyers, maybe I could have done something about it. But it was just really interesting to see that, and it was fun to see that. And you wouldn't get that if you didn't have those different kinds of missions and see that. So it gets you to be creative with your units. It gets you to maybe try units that in some scenarios aren't so great, and others there are.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in this game. There's a lot of depth to it, and I'm just really pleased to see that Fantasy Flight definitely didn't milk the Star Wars brand. You can tell the passion's there to get it right. The models are fantastic. The rules are fantastic. Each model behaves the way you think it should.
Yeah.
And they're still passionately supporting it. And I hope that continues. And it seems like it will. I mean, it seems like they're making good money on these things. So
so far this game has survived 2 purges in the last 3 weeks.
Yes. So hopefully I don't see X-Wing going anywhere.
Hopefully things are settling down over at FFG.
Honestly, I don't see X-Wing or Legion going anywhere. I'm a little worried for Armada.
Yeah.
Armada's the one I'd be a little worried for. Although
Destiny seemed to be doing great, but I guess they had all kinds of supply chain issues.
I think, but I also wonder, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I wonder if that hadn't already hit its end of life cycle anyway. So we'll see what happens. But I do think, I hope that Legion continues, because I'm really enjoying it. And I've said, Craig and I were talking about this the other day. My 2 favorite miniature games now, my favorite sci-fi miniature game at the moment I know it does fluctuate, but in terms of ground-based army scale sci-fi games, it's Legion.
Yeah.
And in terms of fantasy, it's Song of Ice and Fire.
Absolutely.
I think those are just two fantastic games. A lot of similarities in terms of like
Absolutely.
their mechanics aren't the same, but in terms of what they allow you to do, different leaders, that sort of off-table psychology, the way scenarios are built,
card-based units, so
card-based
building the
unit,
is
really
easy.
cool interactions. A lot to love in both these games. Wonderfully different, yet capture the essence of their theme so well.
Yep.
I'm having a hard time not buying Dothraki, Craig.
You're gonna have
They're
to.
sitting right there.
You really have
they're
to.
calling to me.
I have 3
Here.
factions. You need at least 2.
Okay, that might happen too.
So,
oh man, that's
that's
a problem.
Yeah. Well, we should also mention right around the corner is Captain Con.
Yes.
Our Origin Con, if
Yes.
you will.
Yes.
And as usual, we are super excited. We're going to go and we're going to have an event. And what is that event going to center around, Russ? Interestingly enough,
I feel like it might be Star Wars.
it may be Star Wars Legion.
It will be Star Wars Legion. So if you want to come see this craziness that we're talking about,
Yep.
come on down. We're going to try to pull off how many factions? We're
We're going to have 3 factions unless
3
somebody
factions.
gets around painting clones. I'm not sure the clones fit in the theme we're building, though.
No. We're gonna try to have some kind of fluff justification for having droids, Imperium, and the Rebels.
We got to bend the timeline a little bit.
Yeah,
but
we're
not too much.
We're gonna get
not
creative.
too
We're gonna
much.
creative. Well, you figure, just as a teaser, if deactivated droids were like hanging out in a facility and they sort of reactivated again over time,
well,
wouldn't
that
they?
could cause some problems.
Wouldn't they just kind of work? I feel like they
I
might.
would think
as
that they
long
would
as
just come.
we're gonna have to get
come
creative on the
online.
leader. We're gonna have to get creative on the leader.
Yeah,
At least
well,
we've got a fancy operative
I mean,
there.
if the Emperor can come back,
Yeah, spoilers, Craig.
Spoilers. All
right.
the movie's been out for a month.
So what do you think, Craig? How would you rate Legion today?
I would say it's a 3+.
Yeah.
If you like miniature games or Star Wars, it's a 2+.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. 100%.
I
100%.
just really, really enjoy it a lot. And I could have sworn there was something else I wanted to say, but I think we've said it all.
Well, watch for the Star Wars V-Rep. As we mentioned before, we're doing our new video battle reports. And most of these are patron only, but if we can manage to get 2 together in a month, we'll make the 3rd one viewable for everyone. And so we're going to put the Star Wars V-Rep up.
So that'll be up soon.
That'll be up about the time this goes up. Yeah. And then hopefully we'll see some of you guys at Captain Con. Please come by, say hello, and push some figures around with us in the Star Wars universe.
That's what I wanted to say. So in these V-Reps, we're going to start casting patrons.
Oh, yes, I forgot about
V-Reps.
This. Yeah.
And the way we're going to start that as a launch, I think, is at Captain Con.
Ooh, our patrons going to be...
The people who can come and play, I think, will be characters within the V-Rep. And so you'll get an idea, you'll get a sense of how that's going to work, I think.
All right, yeah.
As Commander Bob goes up against Stormtrooper Lieutenant Steve.
All right. Okay, excellent. So listen, watch for that. And yeah, thanks again for all of our patrons who support the show.
Always.
We really appreciate all your guys' support over the years. And if you haven't been a patron yet and you'd like to, hopefully the V-Reps will help give you a little more incentive for a little more value there too.
I think there may or may not be an extensive original fantasy role-playing module that we might be able to put up sometime in February for the patrons as well.
All right, awesome. All right, there you have it. That's Star Wars Legion.
Ciao.
Achievement unlocked. You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@the d6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.